So thank you everyone for coming today. Today we've got Mr. Jawan Lee, the Assistant Director at Charlottesville Area Transit, to talk to the committee regarding public transportation and how that feeds in with what the work this committee does. Jawan, I believe you may know everyone here. Basically, Jawan and I, we were just sort of corresponding a couple of months ago about what this could be about, and we thought that maybe a town hall format with just question and answering. Normally, Jawan, this group is maybe about twice this size, but I think that by just the folks we have here today, I think it's a good representative of some of the issues that we face right now, and could use your input on and have a convo. So Jawan, I'll turn it over to you and the rest of the committee members.
This is like an ask me anything where we just like throw popcorn questions at Jawan.
I mean, thanks for reminding me. Yeah, I know last month we kind of, our signals got crossed and I was abroad anyway. But
no
today.
problem. Yeah, you know, I think one of the things offhand, Jawan, that I've noticed coming into Charlottesville was that the ridership, now that COVID has, we're sort of transitioning out of COVID, it seems like to some degree that your ridership is starting to pick back up. And I'm wondering if just in general, are you seeing the same types of boarding and alighting data for various locations? Are you still seeing that same sort of relative mix post pandemic?
I think, yeah, everyone's numbers are going up, obviously, as people are, like it or not, forced to go to work. But you know, our numbers, we also are coming out of pandemic. Unfortunately, we are still in the reduced service model that we were running during the pandemic. But the increase in number could also be attributed to our new passenger counter. We have an automatic passenger counter we installed last fiscal. So, or sorry, spring of 2021. And we've been able to use that number since July 1 of 2021. And so those numbers are, we believe, are far more accurate than the old way of counting we were doing, which was using the fare box. So that relied heavily on the driver to actually tap the box. A lot of times, you know, a lot of folks had the card where they swipe it or tap it and that would automatically count them. But you know, there's still an element of the driver have to do manual counting, and so all that's gone. You know, the fare boxes are still on the bus, but we're not using them. Obviously, we're fare free, and so it's a multi stage attack, I guess. Fare free, coming out of pandemic, new method of counting that's more accurate. So all that's contributing to the increase in number we're seeing, and we're happy about that. So our next real immediate goal is to try to get our service back to normal, because we know folks are asking for that, and hopefully we'll be there sooner than later.
Now, Jawan, when a person is counted either coming onto the bus or getting off, I mean, I guess are both, is the data that you get from your readouts, does it show the boarding or does it show boarding, or does it show alighting, or does it just show that a person has done?
So the fare box method only counted people boarding. We were not able to count how many people were getting off. With the APC's automatic passenger counters, we're able to count people getting on and off. And obviously it's all tied into GPS and our stop location, so it knows which stop, what time, how many people got on, how many people got off. The technology actually exists where we can look at if we're able to tie it into our AVL or sort of bus GPS system, where, you know, we see it on the map, and you know, we technically could be able to see how many people are actually on the bus at any given time. But right now we don't have the two vendors talking. So maybe if we get a new AVL product down the road or upgrade our current one, that's a feature that the public might be able to see. They'll be able to see, oh, this bus is coming, it'll be here when, and then how full is it, that kind of information. But having that data of knowing where people are getting off, that's been pretty big as far as planning purposes for us. And the stakeholders who wanted that information, they you can kind of guess. You'll be surprised that you can't paint the whole picture just with how many people get on a bus stop. And so it's been pretty eye-opening and helpful to know where they're actually getting off to.
Are there any locations that came out of that alighting data that surprised you? I mean, I think there's probably a lot that like we would look at the list and say, yeah, of course people are going to Wegmans or to Walmart or, Barracks, but are there any weird spots that we're not paying attention to?
I'm sure. I just haven't paid attention to that
Okay.
recently. Peter has his hand up, but let me get this in real quick. We did a study right before the pandemic hit, where we were trying to improve our routes. And no, I'm sorry, my ears are getting all mixed up. I guess it was during the pandemic.
It was.
Yeah. So we use the data for that purpose to try to better our route. But because of the pandemic and the situation, we just never implemented it. And so honestly, that we haven't had a deep dive into our data since, but yeah.
Yeah, thank you. It sort of really connects to the question that I was going to ask is understanding how transit's being used and how that might change because of COVID. So I think that's everybody's job in the transportation space, right? Like, are we using it to get to jobs as much as we were before? Are we using it to get to retail? Are people using transit to get to retail jobs and that type of information? Any insight you might have so far?
Yeah, I think that's a big question mark for a lot of folks, because the assumption might have been when pandemic's over, everyone's going to go back to the way it used to be. But so much changed during pandemic. The way we behave is different now. And so there's a lot of emphasis on trying to figure out what do they want, right? A lot of folks are still working from home. That's like the new norm now. So there's less people actually trying to get to jobs. But on the flip side, that applies to our choice riders, not so much as the traditional riders who have to rely on buses to get to work. Those positions tend to be ones that you can't work from home from. And then the other thing is the whole retail landscape right now. A lot of people switch to buying things online. I mean, it was already trending that way, and then the pandemic kind of shoved it more that way. And so, Fashion Square shut down, and that used to be a big hub really for people to get on and off, and we're definitely seeing less of that. So that's, I mean, we're small compared to some of the other agencies, but trying to figure out what that new norm is. I think a lot of folks are struggling with that and keen on trying to figure out, also each locality is different, and that makes it a little complicated too. There's no standard thing we can apply.
Juwan, do you want to? Well, I don't know. Do you have an idea of what happens, because your fare free grant goes through 2024? Is that correct?
2026 is what we got planned out now.
2026. And so have you determined what it will look like after that to assess whether that will continue or not?
Depends on who you ask, I guess.
Oh, okay.
So sorry, to clarify, the grant actually would run out sooner, but we are funding it till 2026.
Okay.
Saying that, yeah, I think personally there's probably going to be I don't think they're gonna be able to go back to charging, because once you give it to them, you can't really take it away. That's a really hard battle to fight. But then that would also mean the local funding would have to kick in, and so that's kind of where we're unsure. The other thing that's happened is with the price increase of everything the last year or two. I mean, I think we're looking at 20 some percent increase just in our budget. And so whatever model we use to calculate that 2026, we're going to fund it till fair free until 2026. That didn't account for the 22-3% increase we're seeing in our costs. So I think hopefully it'll stay fair free. There are great benefits to that. It makes it easier to ride, less hassle. Fare wasn't a big moneymaker anyway. You know, it was a small percentage of our budget, and a bigger headache than it should have been. The downside that I see or hear is really more on the back end, where our operators are having more conflict with passengers throughout the system versus, you know, it used to be trolley would have, you know, because it's free, we would have people ride around. But now it's fare free, so everyone's kind of spreading around. And yeah, other route drivers who normally never really had issues with their passengers are now starting to have some conflict that they never had to handle. But those are things we're trying to deal with on the back end through training and all that. You know, we're working with the social services and police and all that too. So
interesting. I don't want to dominate the conversation. I have other questions that I can keep asking.
So go right ahead, Sandy.
I think my next question, Jawan, was about sort of the workforce, the labor force. I know you guys had some pretty significant like shortages. They were pretty overwhelming to me, not even working within it. But have you found like some successful strategies, or do you think there's like a larger scale issue that needs some additional support in order to build your labor force to support the services you want to be able to provide?
yeah, it's not one thing. There's no silver bullet. As you know, we recently increased our starting pay for drivers to $21 an hour, and that was a jump from $18.50 something an hour. You know, we definitely see an increase in applications. However, we don't see that materialize into actual employees. We're struggling with that. A lot of that is our processing is not, it's time consuming. You know, from getting an application to hiring can take up to about a month and a half, depending on any barriers, especially in the background check process. The other issue we have always had is obtaining a CDL. So during the pandemic, DMV was a nightmare, more so than it always has been. But they worked a lot to sort of streamline their processes. But in that, by doing so, they kind of shifted the responsibility on the agencies rather than them doing it. So mainly we're having trouble getting a person trained up to be able to test. And that's, you know, the training for that's another 6 to 8 weeks just for the CDL. So you put an application in, let's say a month goes by, you're hired. You come in and you do another 6 to 8 weeks of training. And hopefully, you know, you pass the test the first time, but that's, you know, doesn't really happen. So you add all that up, and then, you know, it's a long time from paper to driving. And so a lot of people get discouraged. Also, you know, getting a CDL is not easy. There's a lot of memorizing the general knowledge test, you know, written tests, and actually
Mhm.
touching the bus and all that, you know, memorizing the parts and what it does and all that stuff. So it's hard. Obviously, it's necessary to have someone who can pass the test drive, because you also don't want, you know, I mean, there's a reason CDL is hard to obtain. So uh, there's
Mhm.
that. I've struggled through the whole pandemic of everyone saying they're looking for jobs, and we have jobs, and not being able to find employees. That's something I've not been able to figure out why or how, but so it's been difficult.
Mhm.
It's been difficult. Um, like I said, there's no silver bullet to fix this. I don't know. I mean, I've talked to other folks and see what they're doing, and everyone's having similar issues. I think a lot of times we compete against class A over the road tractor trailer drivers. There's a lot more money there. And what I've seen often is we'll have folks who go get their class A while they're working here. They leave us, and you know, they enjoy life for a while, but then they realize being on the road isn't, you know, you don't get to come home every day.
Mhm.
You're out there, you're doing whatever you're doing, you come back, and then yeah, they sometimes they decide it's better to come back and do what they do here. So, but you know, they still have to go out and figure it out for themselves.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, Jawan, I was just thinking of, had you all, or has the city, or possibly even the county, done an inventory of the sidewalk facilities um, around your bus stops, or planned bus stops, but more specifically your current bus stops, and then also, have you seen um, any uptick or any trends in people sort of chaining their trips, bicycling, putting their bikes on buses, bike racks, that type of thing? Have you seen any trends? And again, I'm kind of new coming into the area, so I'm not sure how uh, you all have been working with those in the past.
I'm not gonna lie, I don't think I've ever pulled a report to note how many bike rack uses we've had. Now, that is something we track, even in the old system of the new system, that is something we're able to track. So that would be interesting to pull that data and show you, you know, how many people are actually putting their bikes on our racks when they get on and off. So remind me to pull that, and I'll make sure I get it to you. But saying that, yeah, I can't really tell you if there's a increase or not in that aspect. The bus stop thing, yeah, we have frequent conversations. I like to split it off between county and city, because county roads are VDOT, and county has to work with VDOT, so we have to work with county, and county works with VDOT to get sort of permission on stops or shelters or whatever it is. And the city, it's a little more easier, you know, as long as there's city right away, we can kind of work with the city to install a bus stop too. But anywhere we go, the problem becomes ADA, meeting ADA requirements. That's one of our biggest challenges, and the reason for that is we need space, right? If we put a bus stop in our shelter and we can't impede the travel lane, you know, we have to meet that the ADA requirements. There has to be sidewalk leading up to the stop. You know, there has to be a ramp, a curb ramp here and there. So, and we don't control the sidewalks, which makes it, you know, so we're not able to just plop a stop anywhere. We really have to look at the place and the area and figure out where can we do it and how can we do it, and then work with our partners to try to get it done. So in that sense, it's pretty slow. I know we've done an inventory internally. I think 2018 was the last time. We have a whole list of all the stops, what it has, you know, does it have a pole or a bench seat, you know, a bench, a shelter, trash can, you know, all that. We have that, but we haven't done one recently. My latest conversation with the state is they're about to make everyone do one. So I think that's coming and we'll get it done. I don't know if they're gonna make us do it or they're gonna have a consultant do it or whatever, but yeah, it'll be done. So,
Yeah, my understanding is they were going to be working with a consultant to come up with those inventories. I think they might be doing a mix of on-site and desktop, sort of looking at Google Street View, and just getting a good enough sample of their on-site review of stops to say that the Street View is actually valid. So yeah, we should be looking at that probably in the spring.
and to Peter's comment, yes, the city has done a lot to sort of improve what we have. I think the biggest problem is I know that not too long ago we had a conversation with a neighborhood who wanted shelters at their stops, and it was a right-of-way issue, right? You know, we need to acquire the property, a little bit of the property, to be able to put a shelter there, just because there wasn't much space, and that became an expensive endeavor. Another thing, you know, talking about ADA, it's not just sidewalks, it's also the slope. Charlottesville being hilly, that kind of that's another, you know, hurdle we have to overcome when we consider bus stops and shelters. And then county, don't even get me started on the county. So I honestly have in storage a lot of seats, not a lot of shelters. I have a few shelters, but I have a lot of seats. You know, they're kind of ready to go. But we just have a big problem of trying to figure out where it can go.
Yeah.
Why is that? Because of problems you have with VDOT or what?
No, just in general, you know, all above. Even if we want to go to existing stops and try to improve it, then it becomes, you know, we have to improve it to the point where it meets ADA requirements. And I'm not gonna lie, that's a lot of reason why some of the old stops are still there and the way they are, because if we touch it, we have to do some, you know, make it up, bring it up to code, and that's just not something we're able to do. But yeah, just various reasons. It's you know, it's a money thing, it's a code thing, it's, you know, there's a lot of reasons for having amenities but not being able to fully deploy it. Although that is one of the I know it's on Garland's to-do list. His long to-do list is to try to get all our stops, go out, touch them, and improve them.
So, Jawan, if you didn't say this explicitly, but is there almost like a situation of the perfect being the enemy of the good, where making something marginally better might actually improve people's lives, but it would have to be brought to a code standard that would be extremely difficult to reach. So then it stays in the like 5% level rather than like being boosted up to 15% or something like that.
Yes, I'm sure there are a lot of stops that would get a lot more usage if we did make improvements, or if not us, but you know, if improvements were able to be made. And so there's quite a few that does come to mind, and unfortunately, like I said, you know, those are we're not able to just go make the improvements there, because it's a whole picture. You know, that whole area has to be looked at and figure out how we can make improvements to that whole area. You know, well, the counties worked with us, you know, recently. So when a new developer comes in, they have the right infrastructures put in, and city, you know, is working towards trying to get everything connected. You know, there's still a few places where a sidewalk would end at one house and then continue on at, you know, a couple houses down, that kind of stuff. So Anything else? Yeah.
The last question that I'll bring up. Oh,
For the fun of the group, my least favorite
Yes.
transit stop in the system.
That's one of the worst ones we got.
But it
We-
has the characteristics you described, right? It has cross slope. It has like, how would you get there in an ADA friendly way? There's
We-
land acquisition. There's a lot of,
Yeah, and we actually approached that land owner years ago to see what we can do, try, get permission to do something, and that was not successful.
What location was that?
That's on Monticello Road.
Mhm.
you
Near
could
the
like
BP
throw a rock
station.
from there and hit the jaunt headquarters. That's one of
Yeah.
the fun facts about that spot too.
the only other question I might throw out, Joanne, is the labor negotiations. Do you expect that? How do you expect that to sort of impact your services or costs or operations or ability to be competitive for employees?
First of all, I don't really have experience with labor contracts, so this is just, I don't have firsthand experience, so take it what I say with a grain of salt. But my understanding is that once January 1 hits, that's when the employees, I guess, can get together and figure out if they want to form a union. And then
Okay.
if the vote is yes at that point, then the negotiations will start with the city. I don't, because we're a local government, I don't know if it's the same kind of negotiations a driver would have, say, in Richmond or Lynchburg, some of those other private entities or semi-public
Mhm.
private entities. But I don't know, I mean, just from what I know about unions, I would assume wages will go up, right? And so that's added cost. I don't know how the city is planning on handling, because not just us, it's fire and police as well. But I don't know what contingency plans are in place to accommodate for the increase, if any. And it's not just salaries, probably benefits too. So yeah, there is going to be a cost associated with this. I know the idea is July 1 it'll start. So the spring's gonna be fun. But yeah, I hopefully it's something that's gonna be beneficial to both. That's what I'm hoping, but we'll see. I'm eager to get through the process so I can learn it, see it, and learn it. But honestly, I have no idea what it's going to be like.
There's a little ray of optimism there from Peter.
I'm with you, Peter. I hope so. Yeah, like I said, it's a first for me, so we'll see.
But so, I mean, I think that stuff is items like that need to be foregrounded within this political, while it's still within a political process. I mean, so, the customer being the city, or what the partner being the city should be thinking about, what it needs out of the arrangement and listing certain things that don't really require your negotiating partner to give something up. Like those can be, helpful ways to sort of pick up wins that are easier than something like making them give up salary or something like that.
Right. And I know they got a negotiator position posted. I don't know if it's been hired, but they're taking steps to prep for this. Phase 1 sort of us, fire and police, of which I guess the big ones, but there's also, public works and utilities right behind them. So I don't know, Ben's group might decide they want to have an uprising over there. So yeah, it'll be interesting.
Does it include the school bus drivers too, or is it just the?
It can, it can, but I think it would be sort of a separate in the sense that, just because the transit drivers decided to unionize, that wouldn't automatically include the school bus drivers, because they're two very different things. So they
Mhm.
would have to form their own union or a sub-union or something like that, yeah.
Okay,
They would have their own contracts.
I gotcha.
What I heard, so I've heard.
Word on the street, yeah.
And we got mechanics too, so there's that, yeah.
Mhm.
And honestly, polling people, just talking to them, I don't know if I can say which way we'll go.
Okay. Interesting.
It could be the
Well.
other half's just not talking to me.
They're trying not to like reveal their hand. Fair.
Yeah, we had a lot teed up pre-pandemic, and then pandemic hit, and so a lot of things kind of fizzled out, but we have some pretty big projects we want to do, have in mind, or are on the way. And so we had a bus shelter thing, but that's kind of on hold. We're kind of waiting for state to give us guidance on that. We got the microtransit going. We're gonna try to get a new or expand our facility to accommodate more buses and more drivers.
Mhm.
Oh, sorry. And then there's also the alternate fuel study that's about to go out. So we got a lot of things happening, but the idea is to get us to a point where we are a better agency, a bigger agency, and that definitely includes, and I've been saying this for the last couple of years, transit's not really about routes, it's about the bus stops, because we can go down any road, but if we can't put a bus stop, then that's pointless. So, Brennan and I talk quite a bit about what we can do at certain spots, and trying to just get ahead of the game, because a lot of times, when you have new developers come in, they'll build the facility and then ask for a bus stop, and we're like, there's nowhere on your facility we can go. But the ones that come to us prior and ask for input, and we say, okay, right here would be good, and then they build sort of the infrastructure to accommodate that, those are the ones that work out great. So we're trying to get everyone to do that on the front end, not go to a place and then assume we're going to come there.
Well, when
Sure.
we're rewriting the zoning code, maybe we put some teeth in there that says developments of a certain size just have to provide the bus.
Yeah, or a potential.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like
Question,
that.
as far as,
That
the question, as far as your
nuance
all
is great,
state,
yeah. So, sorry, Michael.
as far,
I'll be fast.
go ahead, Peter, finish up.
Yeah, just that nuance is perfect. Like, we need the space for it, but we also don't want developers being the ones making promises to the community that really ought to come from the city's transportation plan.
Yeah.
As part of the site plan process, do you all ask that as a standard question?
As far as providing a bus stop?
Yeah, I mean, you must have an idea of places that you want to have, you've got your bus lines. Do your plan reviewers, one of their checks on their checklist, is it to, site adjacent to an existing bus route, check with CAT whether or not a bus stop is warranted here, ask the developer, even if you can't require the developer to provide one. Do you guys is that part of your business practice?
Yes and no. So Kat is represented at the review team, which is me. But so if it's somewhere we go near where we go, or I think we might go, then yes, we can put an ask in. But that ask is simply an ask, and there's no reason the developer would have to meet it. So that's sort of the, it's kind of us just begging.
Yeah, I think so there, yeah, to answer your question, Michael, and kind of what Joanne was saying was yes and no, or yes, and we could do better. So I know I've talked to our legal stuff or city attorney's office and stuff about, you know, requiring different things. If we had a citywide plan of where we would like to put bus stops, then if a project came up that where it fell on that, then we could at least require them to provide it as part of their plan. But we just need that overall city plan, or at least of where our routes are at, and be like, okay, like this is where we have plans to, because essentially we can require something of the applicant if the city has an approved if it's been put in the comprehensive plan, accepted as part of that. We can at least require them to provide the space for it, if not build it themselves. With whether it's sidewalks or I'll use multi-use path because we've done several of those types of things now. But if there's a corridor where we have an approved plan to put it in, so Emmett Street, we're working on that one. If a development came in on Emmett Street and their new hotel getting built, we can say, hey, we already have this approved plan to build this, not build the multi-use path. We can require them, if not build it themselves, they at least have to provide us the right of way to do it. So I think that's the kind of stuff where we need to be looking in the future, is coming up with that comprehensive transit stop plan of where we would like stops, so that then, if and when those developments come in, we have a little bit more teeth when we do our ask.
So it's interesting to hear that. I mean, of course, one of the great failings is always trying to come up with a plan, and a plan that's specific enough. And it gets down to that kind of level of detail, which is really tough to pull off, and even tougher to keep current. So, but I can appreciate that's where you are as far as required. And it sounds like, Dwan, you're saying you're keeping an eye on the site plan process, and you're finding more often than not that developers are hesitant to give you a little bit of land along the front of a street for something like this, or is there still sort of disconnects that happen in the process? Because I just heard you say, what made me think about this, I heard you say that they'll build a site and then come afterwards and ask you to put a bus stop there. Just why were they not willing to help you the first time they not get asked? I think that's really what I'm asking.
I guess a lot of times we got years of separation from plan to construction, and
Fair enough.
It might not have been something they thought about at the time, or thought they need or cared. I will say, the city's pretty good. Even if I'm not there, someone will reach out and be like, hey, this is going in this location, is that going to affect you all in any
Good.
way? So it's great being able to work with folks like that. The other issue tends to be maybe something is built, but years later someone moves there and then asks us to serve in, that kind of stuff, where it's already existing infrastructure, and then they move there for one reason, and then they just assume like we'd be able to accommodate them, and then once again, we're
Right.
not
Sure.
able to just flip a switch like that. Even if it looks like a simple rerouting, there's a whole process to get all that done. So it's time consuming. I guess a good example is the center, right? We that's something we knew we were going to serve. They moved, they finished construction, they opened, and yet we're still not serving them just because we have a plan, we just haven't been able to implement it. And so I know they've been frustrated with the process, and we've been wanting to do it, we just haven't been able to yet. Although the good news is early next year we will be able to do it. But it's been, they've been open 2 years now, so yeah.
Right. But interestingly enough, you brought that one up as in the county, and I hate to monopolize this, but one more thing. Do you find you have the same insight to the county's site plan process and have the opportunities to ask for bus stops in the county's process?
No, the county, I'm purely reliant on Kevin and his team to reach out. He's pretty good about being proactive with that, and you know, with who the people being on the board of supervisors, who they are, you know, a lot of times transit is actually on their mind, so that helps. But I would have no idea what all plans they are looking at and what could affect us or does affect us. So there is some of that. I don't know if anyone in the city is tied into the county's process or not, but for now, it's just relying on the goodwill of the county and their staff, which they're good. So.
Yeah. Well, the final thing is just like, it would be, maybe it's something to investigate. It's one thing I've been kind of one of my to-do lists for the RTF trail. I don't think that the county automatically looks at the RTF trail on places that are going through subdivisions and contemplates that. So it'd be an interesting question sort of to talk to Kevin and maybe Alberic can follow up, but just sort of find out. I remember the county years ago worked really hard to develop a checklist for site plan review. And I wonder if one of the boxes on that checklist is look for CAT route in the area and reach out to CAT, see if there's any interest in a bus stop here, kind of thing. It might be a simple thing, but it might be very effective.
Well, I'm glad it was there back then. So hopefully it's still there.
I can check. Yeah, I'll bring it up.
No. Yeah, I'm sorry, Juan. I'm saying I don't know if it's there.
Oh, okay.
I'll check on that. It's good. Write that down.
I mean, you know, talking about the county, even when I first got here and just hearing stories, you know, I think traditionally they have not really been really thought about transit, but the more the county, the urban ring has developed and the more folks that have moved there and the more residents they get and the more demand they get, transit is actually something on their minds. And so in the last 5, 6, 7 years, you know, it's been very proactive and willing to work with us to get transit improvements in the county. A lot of the stops there are just ones that has always been there, and you know, that picture Peter showed, that was in the city. That's in the city. I guess that's in the city, but stops like that exist all over the county as well. So we desperately want to fix it, address it, but once again, it's an infrastructure issue.
Yeah, I think it's so great having this conversation right as we're in the process of rewriting the zoning code, because we definitely want to accommodate like future planned routes or future proof, so we can have future routes where they make sense, but also be sure that we can maintain or, you know, bring up to standard existing stops, because I think as the city tries to get less discretionary with its review process, there's going to be even less incentive to get that stuff right unless the zoning code really locks it in.
And you know, this might be pie in the sky still, but if we become an authority, then this whole dynamic changes once again, you know. But at that point, we might have our own money and our own crew. We're just gonna go pave a sidewalk.
Juan, I just wanted to add to your list of coming soon projects. One you did not mention was that next year, CAT is required to develop its transportation or transit strategic plan. It's a plan that they're supposed to be developing every 5 years or so to submit to DRPT so that they get state and federal funds. They're due next year, so we'll be working hard to get through that plan to make sure it's done by next December. We're working through the RFP process right now, so we'll know who we're working with on the consulting side soon enough, and then we'll be moving at a fast pace to get that plan done.
Yeah, and that, just to expand a little bit, that plan is kind of us telling the state, this is what we want our system to look like. So that plan is what dictates where we go and where we stop and stuff like that. And how frequently.
Right, and CAT has had previous plans like that. They were previously called transit development plans. This is a new flavor of that was pulled together by the state, actually right before the pandemic. So not that many agencies have gotten a chance to do this new version of a plan. I think there's maybe 4 or 5 that have done it so far. And so CAT will be one of the earlier adopters of that new format of plan, which is supposed to be driven more at making strategic decisions and not just sort of putting on paper, this is what we're doing, but actually thinking through, okay, what are we doing here? So it's a good opportunity for CAT next year.
Yeah, the state's kind of getting sick of giving us money to do stuff that we never do. So they're trying to hold us accountable to actually do something with the plan we create, which is good. But maybe to Brennan's comment, maybe I'll just say we're going to serve every street in the city, and that'll require infrastructure for new developers.
If you can get that adopted into the comprehensive plan, we can enforce it.
Yeah, but you wouldn't want one on every street. I mean, you don't want infrastructure that you're not going to be using and then have to maintain it too. So it has to have some tie to the route.
Yeah, no,
right.
We don't have the capacity to be able to do that. Plus, most of our streets are actually not transit friendly. They're pretty narrow and whatnot. So
I would
It's
think it
called
would
urban
be
design.
easy enough to say that we've got plans to service any collector or arterial street. Like that would be an easy one to try and do. And then, local streets, are more on a case by case basis, but
I'll see if I can sneak that in there. Yeah, anything else?
Well, Juwan, thank you for coming today. I appreciate you changing up your schedule and allowing myself and the committee to sort of ask you questions, and you've been very candid.
These are the fun meetings. Yeah. So, I mean, I appreciate everything you all do, and it's great working with you all. So it's I don't get nervous talking to you, because unlike some of the other meetings, and that's when I stumble.
Thank you, Juwan. You've been very helpful in providing information to us, and yeah, I've learned a lot today. I hope everybody else has too.
Don't I owe you more data?
Not yet, but probably
Okay.
soon.
But yeah, I'll try to pull the bike usage, bike rack usage, and we can see what it looks like. At least that's a start, and then maybe next year we do the same thing for. I'll do last fiscal, and then next year we can do this fiscal and do a comparison or something.
Do you have that by? Would you have that by stop potentially?
I would assume I can pull it by stop, because
Okay.
it's all that data is
Yeah.
there. So yeah, I'll try to do that.
Yeah. Cool.
Well, thank you, Sandy, for touching on that, and Juwan as well. And Juwan, please feel free to come back and join this group if you'd like to be added to the list. I'll be happy to keep you on the calendar invites, and if you can attend, you can. But we typically talk about bicycle and pedestrian, but occasionally we do want to hear about the public transportation side of it and how folks are actually.
In the past, I've been to a few meetings, and I know generally a bike and a bus, it's usually a conflict. And I'll hear from Chris is it Geist? I don't know if you know him, but he used to email me a lot. Peter Ohms is we go way back, and he emails me quite a bit. So you know, whenever we get those, I try to address them as quickly as possible, because that's extremely dangerous situation. So yeah, we're always trying to make sure bikers and pedestrians, obviously, our drivers are aware of those those obstacles. I mean, I hate to call them obstacles, but you know. So it's a hazard to the drivers. They you know, they should always be aware anyway, but yeah, it's a training aspect thing that we're trying to work on all the time.
Yeah, that's a good point, Juwan. I did not think about the accident or the crash data side of things, and the potential conflicts with bicyclists and preparing for the day. But I think that as the NPO looks at crash data, which we've been doing for a couple of months, yeah, that might be another area at some point to come back and just look at.
I am happy to say I can't recall a bus being involved with, you know, but it's not frequent. So,
Oh
I think
yeah, and then
the synergies,
flip of that
like-
would be.
yeah,
I'm sorry, Peter. Go ahead.
I think the synergies are just like incredible though. Like those easy to use racks. If you think of our urban area as like an 8x8 oval-ish, between a bus and a bicycle, you can get anywhere within the urban area. And so I found that the CCU's racks are awesome, and it's been a more realistic, like, last mile option to like
yeah.
work both a bicycle and a bus.
Yeah, that's the ideal situation where, you know, you would ride the bike to the bus stop, put on the bus, get off and ride it to your final destination. And that's something we're aware of. You know, obviously we've had bike racks on all our buses for a while now, but I think the other side is improvement in services, where the frequency is there and reliability is there. So, you know, you don't have to worry about, you know what, it's just easier for me to bike the whole way. So yeah.
Well, Juwan, you're more than welcome to stick around for the remainder of the meeting. I think we have maybe about 10-15 minutes left, but you're welcome to stick around. If not, I totally understand and appreciate your time for being here.
Well, thank you for having me. And like I said, this was fun for me. Keep inviting me. I'm gonna cut out today early, but yeah, keep inviting me, and I'll make sure I can attend.
Great, Juwan. Thanks.
Well, it was nice talking to you all again.
Bye, Joanne.
Have a dry day. As much
Thank
as
you.
can.
You too. Get some rest.
Bye.
I'm actually going to jump off as well. I've got 2 other meetings starting here at 11. I'll have to probably jump between those 2. I don't know, Ben, were you heading to either of those, or?
Yeah, I'm gonna let Kyle know I'm gonna be a couple minutes late to one of those two.
Okay.
Okay, so yeah, I will be quick. Basically, for the NPO part of the agenda for the updates, I have been looking at the county data and the UVA data. And Sandy, I don't know if my PowerPoint is up, but thank you for that. I'll quickly go through it. And I think what I can do is at some point try to attach it to minutes, and that way other folks who are not in attendance today, they can also see. But I'll go through these really quickly. But basically the first slide is just the timeline of how we've gotten to this point. Starting with March 2022 up until now. Sandy, I'll try to share my screen if I can.
Sorry, Ryan, I thought you were saying you were gonna share it, but I can pull it up for you.
Thank you, Sandy.
Yeah.
Yeah, so basically in March 2022, I received the data from Brian Becker for the county and UVA. In April, the city decided that they were going to hold off until Ben arrived. In May, Smart Scale came, and the budget for one map was just not there for the remainder of the fiscal year. So the decision was to go ahead and wait till FY23. So in FY23, Ms. Ruth Emmerich, she came to the meeting and talked about some of the challenges that the county had when they were putting together their one map portion of it and linking the data. August and September, Ruth, Sandy, and I, we met internally to discuss how we're going to move one map forward. And then in November, Ben came on board. He and I, we spoke, and Sandy had an impromptu meeting, but we did talk about one map, getting the city files, and perhaps Ben may have an update at this meeting on the city's effort. And so now in December, basically it's just news update. Okay, Sandy, I'm ready for the next slide. So you all, Ben, this is new to you. This is the attribute table. As you can see, there are many fields that are incomplete and null. Next slide. Looking at the digitizing that has occurred. This is a 2022 ortho. You can see on the left, there's some digitization. And on the right, there are just areas that will probably have to be checked or in some way remedied. Next slide, Sandy. This is the pedestrian. This is all the projects for county and UVA, basically sidewalk facilities, both completed and they were listed as under construction. The last date on the files was April 2021. So this shows the completed and the under construction. And I'm presuming that those projects that were listed under construction have been completed now over a year later. Okay, Sandy, next slide. Same with bike. This would be bike lanes. I don't think there were any wide outside lanes, but I think these were, and it might have been Sharrow. I have to check that. Maybe not, because I don't see a Sharrow on the downtown mall area. So Sharrows probably are not part of that. Okay, Sandy, next slide. This is the shared use path. Again, completed and under construction. Okay, Sandy, next slide. So this right here is just the aerial. This shows all the facilities, both pedestrian, bicycle, and shared use paths, all as one in the Crozet area. Okay, Sandy, next slide. This is UVA. Okay, Sandy, next slide. This is just central grounds, all facilities. Next slide. University North grounds. Next slide. Hydraulic Road. Next slide. This is south of I-64. Next slide. Pantops area. Next slide. This is up near the airport. Next slide. And this is out 250 East, and I-64 East. Okay, next slide. Okay, so this shows the entire network without the ortho. And And what's next is basically including the city's GIS files, and hopefully we'll get that and plug that in there. And then there's also linking the digitization of these files to a street layer. I think there are 2 more slides, Sandy. Okay, so this is basically what we have now. I just randomly selected the hydraulic road area because it showed the most contrast. One of the most contrasting areas in terms of the modes. Most other areas, at least in the county files, either have an abundance of sidewalk, or you may have a couple of sections of a bicycle facility. So anyway, I used this hydraulic road area. This shows both bike, ped, and the shared use path. And then as part of this phase 1, next slide, we're looking to simplify these classifications to bike only, ped only, and bike ped. So you can travel either by bicycle or walk, or there's a combination of the 2. And so in this example here, you'll see if you're on hydraulic road and you're heading, in this case, south, you've got a bicycle lane in the southbound lane, and you've got a shared use path on the northbound side. So this type of work will be continuing on into the upcoming weeks. And Sandy, the TJPDC internal team has not had a chance to review this. So this is the first time they're seeing this. And so this is subject to change, but this is the general direction in which we're planning to go at the moment. Any questions?
I don't have any questions, but I do have an update. I'm meeting with Mark Simpson this afternoon and should have an update for you on our files and how we're going to send those over to you.
Great, thanks, Dan.
Mm-hmm.
Peter, and then Albert.
Great, thank you. 2 questions I put in the chat that might be just quicker to speak. One is you showed existing and underway facilities. I assume that there was a hidden layer with planned facilities. Like just our earlier conversation showed why that stuff is so crucial, almost more important than the existing facilities. So that's what the radar would, set off, like, hey, developer, there's going to be a shared use path in front of your building. Allow land for it, even if you're not seeing it today. And then the other thing is, this might just be the way it was presented, but the preciseness of the facility type is also crucial for a similar reason. It's not just that we want to have bikes be able to flow to or past a building, but if we're planning to have a shared use path, the whole geometry and the site plan review and all that stuff is quite different than if we're planning a Shero or something like that in that zone.
Yeah, the precision of the paths was something that Ryan noticed, that there are some discrepancies between maybe between the ortho maps that he is talking about and then the actual layers, the GIS layers and the data. So that's something that we'll have to go back and do some quality control on and figure out how to resolve those kinds of things. As far as the planning layers were concerned, we've had some conversations with our staff, and Ruth and Ryan might want to jump in and help refresh my memory. I think one of the challenges we have with the planning layer data, though, is that it's really hard for an organization like ours, who is not actually doing the planning, to stay on top of which plans are active and which ones are kind of like falling off. So that's another really significant challenge, that if that's part of what we want this process to include, we need to be really thoughtful about how we keep that up to date.
But absolutely, like the process is as important as the product, and it's always been like that. But so thinking about how Alberic will be more effective if he knows what the city is thinking, 100 meters down the road in the city and vice versa. So even if it's not there yet.
Mhm.
Yes, Peter, and I think that you know, as a newcomer into the project, and I'm sure Sandy, I've sounded like a broken record to her, just trying to differentiate what the difference between one map is versus, say, a bike ped map, or a bike plan type deal. And one of the distinctions I think that's important, whether they're both part of it, are the proposed facilities. And Sandy, you are correct. We did talk about that, or that was referenced. But yeah, I think that to echo Sandy, I think that a greater discussion probably would have to be had to talk about keeping up with proposed facilities as well, and how that sort of dovetails with keeping one map current as much as possible, or whenever it's time to make those updates.
Mhm.
Out there.
Yeah,
So-
so I like how you kind of have it as bike ped, and then just ped, and not having like shared use paths. People obviously get confused and like, can I bike on a shared use path or can I bike on sidewalks? So all the data is from April 2021, and you don't have any more updated data. Is that what I was seeing in the maps?
Yes, Derek. So basically, April 2021 seems like the last day, or the last time these files were updated. And thinking about sort of Ben's upcoming conversation today, it's you know, it may be, you know, there may be a disconnect in data. The city may have its data up until April 2021, or the city may come back and provide data as current as, say, last week. So yeah, so basically I think to get this up to date, it's going to be what has been done from April 2021 up until now, but that might not be important right this minute. At this moment, it may be just important just to work with the 2021 information, and then sort of include the subsequent months.
Okay, yeah, because getting all the data together, I mean, for the city, county and stuff, it's huge. And we at the county here have been thinking about like how it's gonna get done, and we're probably gonna mention the idea of getting a consultant for the next MPO work plan discussion, so that we're not all trying to coordinate and get all the data together and having to figure out with our staff time, which is already stretched thin with other things like raise and stuff. So we're planning to maybe talk about more in more detail when we have the work plan discussion about getting a consultant who does specialize in these type of plans, so that we can kind of hand off the data we do have, since I know our data for bike ped stuff isn't super up to date, but I've been looking at, and I think we think it might be a little easier for all of us if we can hand it off to a consultant. So that's what we've had a little discussion about, maybe as an idea we can bring up at a more, I don't know, a bigger setting when we're all together. But just wanted to kind of let you know that's where we've been thinking. That's what I thought as well.
Mhm.
Great, thanks, Albert. Michael.
Hey, first of all, it's great to see this effort to get that detailed layer of existing facilities. One thing I would suggest is that if you guys, have you already been talking to Shane Sawyer with BDOT? I know it's important to get a lot of this information into a way that the state can pull it in, because that starts to become pulled into VTrans, which then becomes the basis for a partial basis for how future projects might be funded. And I would call several years back when Shane was still participating in this committee, that he had some concerns. I quite honestly, I can't remember what they were, about the way that some of the line work was being created. So I would just suggest that you guys touch base with them, and they may also have some resources to help in digitizing of some of the information that you're looking to gather. So be sure to reach out and talk to them as you do this this process of actually identifying what's out there today. But again, I've heard you guys sort of mention some of the things that it could do. You sort of talked about the problems of the proposed network. I don't quite fully understand, what is the end product of this? Has that been discussed? Has that been written down? What's the end goal for this?
So Michael, Ruth and Rick here. My understanding is that the end product is a planning tool for the TJPDC to use, and we are not required to submit this to VDOT. I don't think that's really part of what we are planning to do with it. We are planning to use it internally and share it back with the city and with the county for use in local projects and planning purposes. Does that answer your question?
Okay, look, I didn't mean it that direction. I was just saying that the data that you're creating now will be pulled into some of the VDOT stuff. He had some issues. I don't know what they are. Maybe what the work you're doing is perfectly fine. I'm just, if you're creating the data and you can tweak it, you're talking about, I think it was something about whether or not the data was attributed on the center line of the street or on the edge of the street. And if you're doing this level of work and you can make it something that's effective, might be able to get a bigger benefit. That's what I was trying to articulate.
Sorry, I understand that, Michael. I didn't know that there was any interest in VDOT receiving this data. That was not a part of any of the discussions I've been a part of. So that is news to me.
Yeah, I just, go look at the VTrans website, and they do show sidewalk and bicycle facilities in the area. And I believe the counties is a little bit more up to date than what's happened in the city. So it just, eventually it does sort of start pulling into databases that are actually also helpful for people when they're doing planning exercises at the local level. So being able to use the data of the existing stuff, both at the state and local level, I think is just a good idea when we're collecting data.
I totally understand that. I'm just trying to make sure that, we're not spending a lot of man hours to accomplish something that's nice to have. That makes sense. Like I understand it could be used in VTrans, and maybe that could be a benefit in the long run, but we want to make sure that, it's serving an immediate purpose here.
There's also a question about whose responsibility it is to verify that information, because the TJPDC is really trying to sort of collect information that's already available and really sort of minimize the obstacles that we've run into of trying to make this like a perfect thing that's going to serve all the purposes that we've talked about would be nice to have. So we're really trying to start with what's the baseline of what's already available and how can we make that more useful for, sort of moving some of our planning objectives forward and doing that comprehensively and in a coordinated way. So some of these other things might be nice. It might not be something we can accomplish right now, though. It might be something that we need to just get through like this first process of getting everything coordinated and pulled together. And then we can start looking at what is next as this evolves once we have that basic planning tool in place.
Yeah, so thinking about.
I tell you what, why don't I do this? Oh, go ahead, Peter.
I'm just gonna say, like, it's a cost benefit for every element of the thing. So like having stuff be spatially accurate to the foot would be slightly beneficial but highly costly. I wouldn't worry about something like that. But on the opposite end, being able to answer the vague question of, is the county also planning to have sidewalks on hydraulic as well as the city? Like that's a very low cost, high benefit question to be able to answer. So So there's going to be some kind of triage of that kind, and it's a given, I think.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
it's
But
all
going
about
back
that.
and like asking the city or the county to re-digitize the line work because it doesn't meet what the V-Trans system requires, like it needs to be on the center line and we put it on where the actual sidewalks are. Or the city or the county did that, and then they have to go back and fix that. They don't have the man hours to do that. Everyone's
Yeah.
understaffed right now,
So-
and we don't have the man hours.
I tell you what,
I would say if
I
you
certainly
encounter
did
that
not-
issue, then you do that. Yes, that's reasonable.
I tell you what, we're on the existing data and how it's presented and collected and maybe corrected in the future is important. It's not my main concern. I will, but as following up on that, let me talk with Shane and see if he can't figure out some stuff. He may also have some resources that might help you all. Alberic was talking about consultants. So let me follow up with that. To the planning aspect of this.
I also want to be clear that I don't want to go too far down that road, because hiring a consultant versus doing this work in-house also has implications for our organization. So it's not something that we can just commit to. It's certainly something we can have a conversation about. I just don't want everybody to go like too far down that road though at this point, because we don't have that commitment at this point.
Should I not ask him then? Is that what you're saying?
Well, I mean, I'm not saying you shouldn't ask Shane anything or you shouldn't have a conversation. I'm saying that I think the challenge here is that this isn't really like this is adding a component, as Ruth was saying, this is adding a component to the project that hadn't been factored in as far as us being able to scope what the purpose of this was and how it would be useful to us locally. So, I mean, I think if we're talking about VDOT wants something else out of it, that's a conversation that we can have. But I think that's, you know, a step beyond what it is that we've committed to at this point.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I really was not trying to add to your workload. I was trying to find other resources and try and find synergies. It really wasn't trying to be dictating to you all, or it was really just trying to be helpful. Let's put that aside. What is the end product of this as far as a planning component? What is being delivered with the one map project?
Yeah, I think Peter just probably highlighted a good point. It's basically so when the city and the county developers come in, or when the long range plan is updated, it's being able to see where there are opportunities, where there's partnership, or if there's a sidewalk on one side, then what's possibly on the other side. It just a very high level planning tool, but that's the almost sort of like the public side of it, just from a staff public side of it. But then there's like a backside to it where you've got these really detailed attribute fields that go into buffer widths, condition of the pavement, and all kinds of details, which is all part of a much larger sort of second phase, but it's generally a staff tool. But I will defer to like Ruth and Sandy to clarify that response.
Yeah, so we'll have a comprehensive data set that we could share with the localities. We can make maps as needed, and that can be used in planning discussions.
So one of the things that we talked about using this for was to be able to actually conduct some of these connectivity assessments and be able to see where there are existing gaps in the network, to make sure that, there's to look where there's maybe, a continuation of some sort of infrastructure, but the nodes don't line up. It's helpful for us to be able to know when we're evaluating what the needs might be in the system. I think there could be some planning utility to this as well to help us really, understand if we can figure out how to effectively manage sort of the planned infrastructure as well. I think that is a really good opportunity. And then it's also to help us determine not just what node connectivity is, but what the surface is, so we can look at where there are opportunities for coordination to do any sorts of upgrades if we need to upgrade from one surface type to another surface type in order to support sort of developing a better connected multimodal system. So those are some of the things that we had talked about would be the utility of this. And that's why we really tried to scale back from having all of these different types of facilities defined and really getting back to really what we need to know is where are the opportunities for these different modes to have a continuous, travel path to get from one location to the next. And one of Ruth's suggestions is that while this would primarily be a tool for staff to use, it's certainly something where we could make the data available for anybody else who was interested in it. But we wouldn't necessarily provide it as a public facing product.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good idea.
Yeah.
And the basis for the proposed plans will be stuff that comes from local planning documents and the PDC documentation.
Yeah, I think we'll still need to work that out. That might not happen right now. That might be something we add in the future, because I think the harder part about managing sort of the planning aspect of it is also managing like what happens, like how do you remove plans that might be superseded by another plan, for example. So I think that's the part that starts getting challenging. Is, there might be a sidewalk proposed here and then that's superseded by another plan that proposes a offsite shared use path or something like that. So that's the part that we would have to figure out how to manage if that's where we go with this.
Hey, Sandy, I think that's a great example though of like the regional like spatial analytical opportunity that exists. So that's kind of one of the reasons we were thinking about this. So thinking about like the 5th Street, trail hubs / MPO projects, like we're putting a shared use path, dozens of feet away from a sidewalk on 5th Street. Maybe we can avoid that expense by like having like, oh, it's all right here. Let's de-emphasize that idea, because it's redundant actually, because our partner is doing something, a dozen feet away.
Sure.
And the only other last thing I will throw in there is that I know that a lot of the Canvic and RTF community and others, there's like citizens who have like come up with ideas for where trail systems might go. I mean, if this is truly an internal facing document for the local planners to basically use, if that's what the end goal is there, does it make sense to, in that light, expand who does, use the tool and can put ideas on that, on this map, so that it can, it may not be something that is like official. I'm thinking like stuff that like this guy Rip Verkerke's doing over working with Boar's Head, and they're working to try and get trails up to the UVA property, up to Ragged Mountain and connect to Hayward. And, just ideas of stuff that are out there of, people who work on these projects for a long time, put a lot of effort and work a lot with the developers in the area to try and get stuff on. I mean, if this is, a one map that has a lot of ideas on it, would those be ideas that you all would even consider putting on something like this?
I mean, I don't know, maybe Ruth or Ryan can have different opinions, but I think this is one of the challenges that we ran into, where we just had a hard time moving one map forward, because there were a lot of things that it could do. And really what it came down to is we just needed to sort of define a scope that we knew we would be able to accomplish, that would provide some good utilization and some good benefit for the people who needed to access this information. And so we really tried to really think narrow the scope to have a really well-defined scope and say, what is the first step So it's possible that in the future, we want to incorporate some more, maybe there's like a public interface where people can like submit information and it's crowdsourced or something like that. But I think just to be able to move something, to move this forward and to have something that we don't just keep talking about, but we actually have a tool in place that we can build on. I think we really need to be like very careful about managing the scope of what we're trying to do right now.
Need to keep it simple.
That sounds smart. I agree. Keep it simple at the outset, get something established, and then maybe grow it. So again, it sounds like you do have a scope. Have you written that down? Is it something you could share with us?
I think it was like a brainstorm on a whiteboard and we have a picture. Somebody has that picture somewhere.
Hey, I do.
We can put something on paper.
I think having something on paper would be extremely valuable just for continuity purposes. Like I feel, you know, so sorry for you guys having to like, you're like dwarves mining in people's brains to like find like memories of stuff that was said or committed to or dreamed up and yeah.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be so like the idea is not complicated. The work itself is obviously tremendously detail oriented and complex, but the idea is pretty simple.
Sure.
Well, that's all that I had for MPO updates. Alberic, Peter, Michael, anything from the county, Peter?
Nothing right now. I asked Jessica and Kevin, and they both said that they're we're good. I just they wanted to bring up the one map stuff that we discussed before. So that's all I had.
Would the county be interested to talk about your, would you be interested in talking about your raise grant at the next bike ped meeting?
Yeah, I can actually, I think we wanted to mention that. So yeah, it would be good if we can do a presentation. I can present at the next Rural Tech or the other one as well about raise grant, kind of where we are with that and what we plan to do as well. So if we add it, I'd appreciate that.
Yeah, very well, great.
Thank you.
Peter?
No major updates, just that the annual mobility summit is greenlit for February 24th. Our speakers are committing. It's gonna, as always, it's gonna have a focus on bringing new audience and more equity into mobility groups. So that's going to be exciting. And also, I'm excited about your proposed agenda item for January. I think there's going to be a lot of interest.
Michael, did you have any updates from VDOT?
Nothing at this time. Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you all, Ruth, for your time, Sandy, for getting this together with the PowerPoint. Alberic, Peter, thank you. And I will try to send out a meeting invite for January. I'll include Alberic. We'll probably have, I'm sure, maybe the scope written out by that time, maybe some more work with one map and getting the city file. So it sounds like that there's definitely an interest in a January meeting to some extent. So thank you all. If there's nothing else, then I'll just end the meeting here.
Thank you, Ryan. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Bye,
Have a
guys.
good day.
Merry Christmas or happy holidays, everybody.
You too, Sandy.